G'day guys, back with the Outer Circle, and today I want to talk about the Horus Heresy as a campaign, and really, I want to talk about the Istvan legions. So, at the start of the Horus Heresy, in 05 Millennia 31, yep, cool, 5th year of the 31st millennium, that is when Istvan III, Destruction of Prospero, the beginning of the Martian Civil War, all happen at once. In the second year is when you get Istvan V, Invasion of Paramar, all that kind of thing. And Thramis Crusade and all that stuff all takes place in the third year. Shadow Crusade, all the most of the novel series, in fact, takes place in that third, fourth, and fifth year. And it's not up until the 13th year that you get Beta Garmin, and in the 14th year, you get the Siege. And the Solar Campaign, quote-unquote, lasts for pretty much the whole time, because obviously with the Martian Civil War going on, and the fortification of the area, yada yada. So for the purpose of this video, first thing we'll do is, I'll just mark that down off to the side. So I've got my lovely little colour palette here. So this is the sort of date range we're looking at of where most of the stuff in the Heresy happens. And it's from the 6th to the 13th year, so 7 years. Because that first year, it's the initiation of the Heresy, so you only get a couple of battles. Cygnus, Prospero, Istvan III. And the last year is the full-on Siege of Terra. Everything else happens in the middle. That's a long span of time, and one of the most common arguments I would see from people is that, for example, Raven Guard, Salamanders, Iron Hands, they were wiped out at Istvan, therefore they don't factor into the campaigns. So, on this map here, I'm just going to do something. And that little something is I'm going to draw a line. And the line is going to look a bit like this. So, who knows what that line is? That line there is the Ruin Storm. We have the Night Haunter and the traders in the domain of the Night Haunter, and the Thramis Crusade over there, which I will circle in a dark blue. I think a nice dark blue, nice rich one will do. So the Night Lords are in this area here. And along with them, we've got, I'll use pure black, we also have the Dark Angels, who were sort of hanging out in this area here at the commencement of the Great Crusade. Then you've got the Ultramarines, obviously, who are fighting mostly the Shadow Crusade in this region at the time. And, of course, the Blood Angels, who are in this sort of general area as well. Then you got their friends over in the Word Bearers, or the Turd Bearers, who've been fighting in this area, along with the World Eaters, who've been fighting with them in the same area. And then you've got Perturabo's boys. They're off fighting it. Basically, everything in this area is where the main front is for all the other traders. So I'll just use two colours there to represent sort of Sons of Horus and Iron Warriors, Death Guard, all that kind of thing. They're in this part of the galaxy here. Give or take. Now, the interesting one is, in purest of white, you have the White Scars right in sort of this area here. So, you've got that there. And then, of course, we have Istvan, where the Heresy breaks out. We've got a nice vibrant red for that. So that's all the way up here. So this is where the massacre happens. So for the better part of 7 years, most of the Horus Heresy really takes place in that northern sector, that Horus Dark Empire. And on the borders of that, apart from places like Baal or Mazoa, those sort of loyalist bastions in the midst of it all, most of your fighting is taking place in basically this front line here. This is the line. So most of the fighting is taking place north of that line in the Horus Heresy. There are definitely enclaves of stuff happening in other areas. You know, the Realm of the Reaper, you've got the Death Guard doing their thing, and you've got traders attacking all over the place, but there's a lot of stuff happening north of that line. Now, let's think about who's operating in the area. Well, you have definitely got the remnants of the Istvan legions. Now, the Raven Guard are the most depleted, but they can still muster, as a single fighting force, over 4,000 legionnaires, which is not much when you go up against legions like the Sons of Horus, who are sitting around probably 60,000-ish after the Istvan battles, because they actually were heavily depleted by Istvan 3 and Istvan 5. So you've got those guys in play. You've also got the Salamanders, who had also copped pretty bad casualties. They're down to, I think, 7,000-ish, if I'm reading my black books correctly. Again, insignificant compared to, a tenth of the size of the Traitor Legions, but at the same time, that is still the equivalent of 7 Space Marine chapters in 40k, and you would not sniff at 7 Space Marine chapters. 7,000 Legiones Astartes is more than enough to conquer many a planet. Then you've got the Iron Hands. Now, the Iron Hands are an interesting one, because it's only about 1/3 of their forces that actually were destroyed at Istvan, because Ferrus basically rushed off with the troops he had right there at hand. In a fit of frustration and anger. He was too headstrong, and then he lost it, which is why he went off and did that thing. So what you have is you've still got 30,000, 40,000 easily Iron Hands at play here, and the Iron Hands homeworld, I'll circle in nice bright yellow, because I haven't used that colour yet. Sorry for the colourblind, I do apologise, but it is Medusa. So it's right there. Raven Guard is Deliverance, right here. Nocturne is the Salamanders here. Now, there's some debate about whether they fall on that side of the Ruined Storm or not, but I believe, because they do manage to get Vulcan's body there, that they're on that side. So, for all intents and purposes, for up until the breaking of Anvilus in sort of the 12th year of the Heresy, so that sort of second last year before the siege, up until then, they're stuck on that side of the Ruined Storm. So you can basically say that everything on this side is not in play. And that is Blood Angels, Ultramarines, Dark Angels, kind of the Night Lords to an extent. Yeah. So what does it leave you with? Well, obviously you have the White Scars, who are in the Chondax area, but they're ranging far and wide, attacking the traders in the rear areas. You've got the Iron Hands, the Salamanders, and the Raven Guard. The only unaccounted for Loyalist Legion here is the Imperial Fists, who are holed up on Terra. And the Space Wolves, who are in recovery from the battle at the Alaxes Nebula, which, for the record, happens roughly in this area near Prospero. I think it's a little bit to the galactic east, somewhere around there. So, Space Wolves, they're kind of in play, but they're doing a lot of rebuilding because they got savaged at Prospero, and then they got ambushed by the Alpha Legion directly afterwards. So they're really in recovery mode for the first few years of the Heresy, trying to get together new recruits and all sorts of things. So, Fenris, by the way, is over here, their homeworld. So yeah, big moves going on there. What it means, though, is that majority of your fighting is being done, like I said, in those rear areas behind that Traitor front line. So behind that Traitor front line, if I get rid of all these little circles I drew, really your campaigns in the Horus Heresy mostly are going to take place sort of around here. So that bright green line Again, sorry for the colourblind, but I've got to use something to mark it out. That bright green line there, that is the area in which most of the Horus Heresy actually takes place, most of the fighting. And the most concentrated fighting is happening around the Paramar Beta Garmin corridor, which is this area. I'll use a different colour marker. Some sort of orange will do. So this is the main corridor of the fighting, because this is the direction Horus is trying to head to from Istvan straight towards Terra. So what forces have you got to fight him with? You've got the White Scars, the Iron Hands, the Raven Guard, and the Salamanders. So for all intents and purposes, it doesn't do to say that those legions, ignoring the White Scars, that those legions were basically wiped out at Isfahan 5. No, those legions still, as a whole, represent a full legion's worth of strength between the survivors of those 3 legions, plus the White Scars are full legions. There's 2 loyalist legions equivalent there. And they're not fighting the full strength of many of the traitors, because the Emperor's children basically off doing their own thing. The Night Lords are over in the domain of the Night Haunter doing their own thing, right up to the absolute middle of the Heresy. For the first 5 years of the Heresy, basically, the Night Lords are off in the domain of the Night Haunter in that far east area. So you've only got the Sons of Horus, and the Shadow Crusades also going on this time. So basically the World Eaters and the Word Bearers are taken out of the equation because they're fighting on the other side of the Ruined Storm in Ultramar. So you've got Sons of Horus and Iron Warriors and Death Guard maybe. So 3 legions that are actually doing the job of prosecuting the campaign, actually fighting in Horus's Dark Empire. So it's 3 legions versus 2 really, with White Scars and such, and the Iron Hands of the Shattered Legions raid against them. So I think it's actually very thematic and perfectly plausible. This is, see, where I get to the point of the video. It's perfectly plausible to have those legions actually forming the mainstay of the campaigns that should be taking place in the Horus Heresy. Because you have 7 years there of fighting. It's representing, well, the whole Heresy as a whole is only going for 9 years. So 7/9 of your Heresy is being fought pretty much by those legions. They're doing the bulk of the heavy lifting. Because the other legions want to help out. Like the Ultramarines, the Dark Angels, the Blades, they want to help out. They're on the wrong side of the Ruin Storm. And the Space Wolves are completely savaged. I mean, they get in there when they can. I suppose you could add them into our Shattered Legion equations, but they are not Legion strength in this time. They are just too badly mauled between Prospero and Alaxi's Nebula. At least half the Legion's probably dead by my reckoning. Again, if I interpret the books correctly. Imperial Fists, they hold up on Terra, they want to help as well, but they've basically dispatched 1/3 of their Legion's strength, which was lost at Fel, and are now just scattered around the galaxy. So, really, I suppose you could say that a lot of the games you play in the Horus Heresy probably should be focused around those smaller skirmishing battles where, okay, the Raven Guard are a depleted Legion, sure, but what happens when you still send 4 chapters or 4,000 Legionis Astartes into the squishy rear lines of the traitors and they start pulling off surgical strikes against, cults and militia? Yeah, it's probably going to have a huge impact, isn't it? And those are the things that interest me about the Heresy. So that argument I see a lot when I point out things like, why aren't they releasing consoles for these legions and instead spending all their time releasing, consoles for, say, Sons of Horus, who have like 60 of the things? This is why it's important to me, because it doesn't matter if those legions were absolutely savaged at Isfahan, they're still doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and a lot of the cool campaigns and the interesting stories to be told are what's happening in that region, in that orange box at the edge of that green line along that battlefront, where those shattered legions, quote-unquote, are fighting those hit-and-run campaigns where, that's the Raven Guard's strength. They don't want to be deployed as a whole legion prosecuting a trench warfare, attritional campaign. That is not their style. That's the Iron Warriors style. The Raven Guard style is, let's send a recon squad in and see if we can assassinate the general on the other side. That's their campaign, because, rational Marines. yeah, there you have it. That's what I think we should be doing with the Horus Heresy, and that's why I think the justification is there for those Isstvan legions to be looked after. And it would also be very interesting to see in the middle of the Heresy what sort of units those legions come up with in order to perform certain tasks. Because we know there's, okay, the Raptors are a thing for the Raven Guard, but the Raptors are a side effect of, the experiment gone wrong, as it were. But what did the Raven Guard, the Salamanders, the Iron Hands, what sort of technology did they come up with to try and give them an advantage? To try and, because they're at the numerical disadvantage, what did they do to try and help them win their campaigns? They must have done something interesting along the way. But unfortunately, the novel series hasn't really explored it. And the game definitely doesn't really explore it beyond a little bit of stuff in Book 6, maybe? Where it talks about Shattered Legions, and it talks a little bit about the Salamanders prosecuting a campaign in that. But that, to me, is the interesting stuff in it. A war is not a won and lost, as it were, at a single battle type thing, okay? Yeah, there are always exceptions to this. You get your fall of France, your 1944 France, when the Germans just steamroll through for various reasons. That happens. You also get your... Well, think. In fact, better analogy here, your World War One. World War One, people think of the big battles, the Somme, Passchendaele, Verdun, First Ypres, Brusilov offensive, the Kaiserschlacht. These are the sort of things people think of in World War One, but the majority of World War One is trench raids and prolonged artillery bombardments of enemy rear echelons and trying to break up supply chains and randomized gas attacks and things like that. Day-to-day nuisance warfare. The trench raids are a great example because that's what I think the Loyalists are doing here. They can't attack the enemy head-on. They'll get gunned down by the machine gun. So what do? They sneak over at night and club a bunch of guys to death in the other trench, and if they're Americans, they take a few boomsticks along, because 12-gauge shotguns are very effective at clearing trenches. It's a thing. That's what the Loyalists should be doing. So, yeah, Loyalist books, Loyalist rules, give us some of that. Stop with the focus on the Siege of Terror, especially Forge World / Games Workshop, because, look, I'll highlight it in the brightest of red. This is the Siege of Terror here. This little line here at the back. This is the Horus Heresy. Notice how much bigger the Horus Heresy line is than the little pissy Siege of Terror one over the side. Okay? That's where the focus should be. It shouldn't be a focus on only the Siege of Terror. I get it, you want to release a box set or something, and you really want to market the Siege of Terror, even though you've pretty much released the book series, and rather, wouldn't you do it in reverse? You release the book series after, anyway. Focus on the cool stuff. Focus on the stuff in the middle. Focus on the trench raids, please. Because you do so much stuff with, Blood Angels and Dark Angels and Ultramarines. They're not really fighting anyone. In the big scheme of the galaxy, unfortunately for them, they're fighting a lot of meaningless cleanup, killing what they can because they're basically stuck on the wrong side of a wall. The Ruin Storm's a big wall in space, and they're stuck on that side, and they can only clean up whatever traitors are on that side. And once the traitors are cleaned up on that side, they just sit there twiddling their thumbs for a couple of years, unfortunately for them. So most of your fighting is being done by those other legions. And that's the interesting stuff to me. Anyway, Mac with the Outer Circle, let me know what you think about this situation in the comments below. Obviously, this is a somewhat long, rambling video, but this is the sort of thing that goes through my head. This is obviously the official maps from Forge World here, and there's a screenshot from one of their open days of their official timeline. So, interesting stuff to think about there, and I want to know what you think. Do you think that I'm completely wrong with my take? I get it, people might not be interested in certain legions, but I guarantee if you had a ton of cool models released for Raven Guard and Salamanders, they probably would become very popular overnight. Because I know what Warhammer fans are like. That's all from me, and I'll see you on the next one.